Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump has been found guilty of all 34 counts against him. What is this going to mean for crypto? After all, he was seen as the most crypto friendly candidate currently. What does it mean for the Trump meme coins, the MAGA tokens? I'm going to share with you in today's video what I think. This is fresh off the press. So I'm making this video a little bit raw. It's going to be mostly unedited, but I want to get this out to you. I want to share with you exactly what I think is going to happen. I was talking with my wife yesterday about this whole thing. I said, listen, I think the guy's got about a 60% chance of getting convicted. He's got about a 30% chance of a hung jury, and he's got about a 10% chance of going essentially scot-free, being found acquitted of everything. I didn't think it was likely because he was in where the jury pool was selected from, the district that he's in. He only had gotten like 5% of the vote last time around. So clearly the jury's most likely going to be biased against him. So I didn't think it was likely that he was going to get acquitted. But I want to talk about today what I think is going to happen from here and how do I think it will ultimately affect crypto. And specifically, I want to talk about the meme coins, the MAGA token, the Trump token, and that sort of thing. And I want to sort of explain my logic and my thinking here. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a cryptocurrency enthusiast. I'm just commentating on this. Don't take this as any sort of financial advice at all. So here's what I think is going to happen overall. But before I get to that, let me just take a quick look at the MAGA token, which is the one I'm in right now. On the news, it seemed to pull way back, and then now it's going back up, which I think it's actually going to go up, and I think it's going to do really, really well. In fact, to be honest with you, I was out with my kids at the park. If I would have seen this happen, I probably would have loaded up right here. I was wanting the price to come down a lot lower, and it didn't. I think it's likely to have a huge move up. And let me explain what I'm saying, because I think that people who are really in the know in crypto, people who are paying attention to the various lawsuits from the SEC, I think some of them are going to feel like there's some parallels here. And let me share with you exactly what I'm talking about. There's about this is an 11-minute video, but there's about the first 1 minute here or so. I want to play for you, and then it's gonna make sense when I say what I think is going to happen. So he got convicted. Now here's where I got completely shocked. I did not expect him to get convicted on all 34 counts. And the reason I didn't expect that is because if you're familiar with the judicial system in the US, most of the time prosecutors will charge someone with 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 crimes. And if it goes to jury, typically they're found guilty for, one or two or part of them, but they'll never be found guilty for all of them. If there's 12 crimes, usually they'll be found guilty for 3 or 4, for example, because the prosecutor is oftentimes trying to throw any charges they can at an individual and hoping that something sticks. Now, what's interesting is there's a certain voter base that has had to deal with the judicial system and feels like it's somewhat unfair. And for the first time ever, there's a presidential candidate who has basically felt that same feeling. Now, you could argue whether it's fair or not, and that's fine. There are a lot of people looking at this on the political spectrum. There's two schools of thought. There's 30% on the left and 30% on the right. 30% on the right would have said he's going to be innocent no matter what, period, end of story. This is all a fraud. The whole there's too many shenanigans. Donald Trump's a white knight. He's trying to save our country. The 30% on the right will believe that until the day they die. They will take you to their grave. He was the greatest president. Whatever. 30% on the left, he's the worst president on the planet. He's horrible human. He should have never been president. Whatever negative thing you could say, 30% on the left are going to say that no matter what. The middle, and maybe it's not 40% in the middle, but there's about 30% in the middle that typically are classified as independent voters. But I think it's even moderate people who see themselves as Democrat, moderate people who see themselves as Republican, and then the independent base in the middle. Now, I will tell you, everybody wants to figure out, everybody on the right feels like I'm leaning left. Everybody on the left feels like I'm leaning right. But let me explain to you where I fall on the spectrum. Very similar to cryptocurrency, I always try to take an objective view on politics as much as I can. Donald Trump would have never been my first choice as president. He wasn't my second, third, fourth. He was in the lineup at probably number 4. to be honest with you. I definitely did not want Donald Trump to run for president, and I definitely did not want to see him get elected. That was my original. I had a couple of Democrat candidates and I had a couple of Republican candidates that I thought would have been much better choices. By the way, I will also say this: Joe Biden was not who I wanted to see as president on the left at all. I would have never voted for Joe Biden, mainly because I think he's entirely too old, and I honestly don't think he's mentally sharp enough. And for that matter, I don't think that Donald Trump is either at 70-something years old. I don't think we should have 70-year-old presidents being elected in the U.S. Personally, that is my personal opinion. You can't become a president if you're too young. I don't think you should be a president if you're too old either. Now that I have officially lost a big percentage of my viewers because I haven't said Donald Trump's going to hell and I haven't said that he's a savior, so I've officially lost 60% of my viewers now. Let's break this down and start to look at this a little bit more objectively. Then you'll understand what I think is going to happen. First of all, let me just give this prediction. This will get when this goes to the appellate court on appeal, it's going to be completely thrown out. And I told my wife, if he's found guilty, it will be thrown out on appeal. Now, I recently heard a progressive lawyer, progressive meaning leans left, he said Donald Trump's going to be found guilty, he will do no jail time, and it will get thrown out on appeal. That's what he said, and he was a left-leaning lawyer. Now, I actually think he was most likely going to be found guilty. I do think he's going to go to jail. As crazy as that sounds, I do believe it's going to happen. And I also think that he will be acquitted on appeal. It will be thrown out, is the word I should say. It's going to be thrown out on appeal. And let me explain why. There's a lot of reasons even before this. There's a lot of reasons why this is going to get thrown out on appeal, but I think this clip here with Megyn Kelly, which I find her commentary very fascinating. This is a woman that they made an entire movie about her run-in with Donald Trump. I mean, an entire movie was made about it called, was it Bombshell or something like that? Anyway, it's a fascinating movie. But look at what she says in the first minute here, and it gave me a lot of respect for her. She explains this very clearly.
This was Alvin Bragg right after he indicted Donald Trump. He came out and said...
So Alvin Bragg's a prosecutor who indicted Donald Trump. This is one of several reasons I think this is going to be thrown out on appeal.
I'm indicting him for falsification of business records. People said that's a misdemeanor and the statute of limitations is expired. How can you bring that? He said, well, it becomes a felony with a longer statute of limitations if it was done, the falsification, to cover up an underlying crime. Then the press asked the question we all had on our minds. What was the underlying crime? What was he trying to cover up? And here is that moment.
So to be clear, when he was charged with this crime, the crime that he went to court for in New York, he could not be charged with that crime because that crime was a misdemeanor, unless that crime was done to basically create another, to cover up or to commit another crime. For example, if someone, goes into your mailbox, that's technically whatever, misdemeanor, whatever. But if they go to your mailbox and they're, trying to stack ballots or shove ballots in there to sway an election, then that gets elevated to a federal crime. So even if the statute of limitations are past someone tampering with the mailbox, for example, which I think that's a federal crime anyway, but just making an example how a small crime can be elevated to a higher crime as long as that small crime was being done to cover up or to perpetuate the higher crime, the higher level crime. Now, the reason this is interesting is because Alvin Bragg, the higher level crime, he never mentioned it. And there's a reason he probably never mentioned it. First, let's listen to what he says right here.
34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. It is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes.
And they were done to conceal another.
Okay, listen carefully to what this guy says. I'm going to see if I can put the closed captions on. So he said they were done to conceal another crime.
But the indictment does not specifically say what those crimes were, what laws were also
the indictment.
So what was the higher level crime? That's what he's asking. What is a higher level crime?
It doesn't specify that because the law does not so require.
So he said, basically, I don't have to tell you what the higher level crime is because the law says I don't have to tell you what the crime is. By the way, this is rare, my understanding, in most states. This is a specific statute in New York. But then listen to this part.
I don't have to tell you. I don't have to tell you. It wasn't until closing arguments yesterday when the prosecution got up second, because under New York law, unlike in most places, the defense has to go first and the prosecution goes second. And after the defense attorney had already sat down, that's when we finally learned what the underlying crime was. He got up there, and while he cast a wide net still, saying it could have been a tax violation, it could have been falsification of other records, like double falsifications, but really they're hanging their hats on the violation of federal election campaign law.
Okay, so here's the challenging part here. They never told the defense team, Donald Trump's lawyers, what the higher level crime was until, my understanding is, it was actually the day before the last day. And since it was violation of federal election campaign, which is what they were saying, the smaller crime, if you come back here to this guy here, this Alvin Bragg, when he was saying the law doesn't say I have to stipulate, so therefore I'm not going to stipulate. Well, part of the reason for that is because he doesn't have jurisdiction over federal election law. But once it gets into the court system, now the judge can bring it into play. The prosecution can bring it into play. The problem is they never told the defense what the higher level crime actually was. And then when the defense realizes it, they want to bring up an election official as an expert witness to clarify the law. And the judge in the case told them they could not do it. This isn't in this actual video clip here, but the judge in the case told them that they could not do that. So that actual expert witness, I can't think of his name right now, Blake something, he actually mentioned on Twitter that the defense didn't call him up because essentially the judge gagged what he could say, that it didn't make any sense to bring him to the stand. So therefore, he didn't go to the stand. Well, this is clearly going to be a problem at the appellate level, at the appeals court level. Now, it gets even crazier. This is also not in this clip, but the other thing that happened is the judge gave instructions to the jury on the way out. And he said, in order for Donald Trump to be found guilty of this lower level crime, you have to find that he was guilty with either tax evasion, business falsification of records, or campaign finance. He had to break campaign finance law. You have to find him guilty for one of those three. But by the way, you don't have to even be unanimous in which three. So if juror 1 says, hey, I think he was doing tax evasion, and juror 2 says, no, he wasn't doing tax evasion, he was breaking campaign finance law. It doesn't matter if they disagree on what he did, he would still be found guilty. That is very arbitrary. It's very unclear. And the judge never gave clarification, which he told the defense that he would. He never gave clarification to the jurors on the actual election law that he should have been breaking. And here's the problem. This entire thing, I feel like they know they're on shaky ground and it doesn't matter. I think this is so political and they're spending taxpayer dollars. And I think this is going to upset many moderate Americans because at the end of the day, how can you not root for an underdog? And how does this guy, now Donald Trump, not look like an underdog once you understand the details of what's going on? So what do I think this actually means for crypto? Well, we have to look at what's been happening in crypto. What does this have to do with crypto? I told you there were some parallels. Well, totally different agency, totally different purposes. But think about what's going on with Coinbase. I also have not been a fan of Coinbase for years. I have not used my Coinbase account for years. I put a video on my channel talking about why I didn't like Coinbase because A, they were centralized, B, they were working with the IRS. They were seeking the IRS's help to create a contract so they could sell customer data to the IRS several years ago. I publicly talked about it on this channel. But then I can't help but appreciate the Coinbase's position in this particular lawsuit. So the SEC charges Coinbase for operating an unregistered securities exchange broker and clearing agency. Here's the problem. This is the same SEC that there's two problems here. The first problem is, and I'll get to what I think is going to happen to the MAGA tokens here in a second. The first problem is the SEC, just a year or two before this lawsuit, essentially cleared Coinbase to go public and to become a publicly traded company. And I've heard all the nonsense that people say about, well, that's two different things, yada, yada, yada. Listen, I don't care. The average person, the average voter in US, the average user of Coinbase, they care. That is ridiculous. How can me as an individual, how can the SEC say, hey, they're able to go public, and then the SEC comes back and says, oh, by the way, they're doing illegal activities. We allowed them to go public, the exact same agency, but now they're also acting as an unregistered securities exchange. You mean you couldn't figure that out before you allowed them to become a publicly traded company on the stock exchange? But it doesn't stop there. It gets better. Gary Gensler goes out to the media, and he actually says, here's the thing. They're operating as an unregistered securities exchange. All they need to do is become registered. That's it. Coinbase sends a formal request through their lawyers on guidelines to make certain, A, that they can become registered securities exchange brokers, and B, how do they know which cryptocurrencies that they're allowing their customers to buy would be considered unregistered securities by the SEC? They asked for clarification. Very reasonable, very prudent. And then it gets better. The SEC comes back and basically says that the SEC rejected Coinbase's petition in December, meaning they rejected the petition to clarify the rules, to let them know how to make certain that they're not unintentionally dealing with unregistered securities. And then it did not offer much of an explanation for why it won't write crypto-specific regulations. The exchange's lawyers are also arguing the SEC, Gary Gensler, who made a statement when his agency rejected Coinbase's petition, argued that the regulator has been working on crypto rules, even if they're not the rules the industry wants, and that it is important to maintain commission discretion in setting its own rulemaking priorities. In other words, we don't have to tell you when you are selling an unregistered security that we can in turn sue you for, even though we have no public rules or public laws or public regulations to tell you what is an unregistered security. This makes people feel like Coinbase is railroaded. All of a sudden, Coinbase is the underdog against the behemoth. Now, all of a sudden, Coinbase looks better in this scenario. Heck, I even started using the Base protocol because I couldn't help but appreciate that it was a decentralized aspect of Coinbase's business model. Then all of a sudden, I started researching Brian Armstrong. Those of you who've been following my channel, I've made videos about this. All of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? Brian Armstrong's not such a bad guy. I don't like the way he's going about mass adoption, but he believes in the future of cryptocurrency. He's believed in it since he was a young man. It's why he initially started this business. Again, I don't agree with how he's going about creating mass adoption and his belief in cryptocurrency, but he and I both agree that cryptocurrency should allow individual people to have independent economic freedom. He fully believes that. So all of a sudden, I'm like, listen, maybe I was wrong in some ways about my thoughts on Coinbase. And I believe that's what's going to happen to a whole bunch of people when it comes to Donald Trump. Now, with that being said, what does this mean for the MAGA token? As you can see, we're starting a green candle here. This is on the daily. Let's go. Oh, this is a 4-hour. Let's look at the daily. So the daily, we're still down, but we were already down a little bit. So in the past 4 hours, we're starting a green candle here. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. If this doesn't start going up immediately, I believe it will get thrown out on appeal. When Donald Trump goes to jail, it's very interesting when he goes to jail. He gets sentenced, I think it's July 11th or 17th is when he's going to get sentenced. When he gets sentenced, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I know there's going to be a lot of volatility, which is why I'm willing to be in the LP position that I'm in. And I do have a video coming out. I've already got it started, but I got a video coming out, a tutorial on understanding how to yield farm and providing LP and that sort of thing. Again, I'm not recommending that any of you all do that with meme coins. They're one of the highest risk sort of tokens that you would ever want to provide liquidity for. However, you always want to see a lot of volume, a lot of trading volume when you're providing liquidity. And I think that we're going to get a lot of volume. I think once it gets thrown out on appeal, I believe these tokens are going, all of them, the MAGA token, the Trump token. I mentioned 3 of them in a video yesterday. I'll try to link that video above, or at least I'll put it in the description. I believe that these tokens are going to absolutely skyrocket. Why? Because the majority of people holding these tokens are holding these tokens because they already like Donald Trump. Very few of them are like me. For me, it was all about making a quick play. I mean, these are meme coins. They have actually nothing to do with Donald Trump. They're collectible cryptocurrencies. And unfortunately, as with a lot of coins, people hold them because they somehow identify with the token. And this is true with the MAGA token. It's true with the Trump token. It's true with the Super Trump token. And it's probably true with some other ones as well. But I genuinely believe that people are going to hold on to these tokens because they somehow identify with Donald Trump. It's their proxy vote. Even some of them won't ever go vote. And if you're an international citizen and you like Donald Trump, you would hold it for that reason alone. But I believe that they are essentially going to turn this guy into a freaking hero. And it's crazy because all of a sudden they've got a billionaire looking like he's a man of the people because the system is screwing him over. And listen, it doesn't take all you need to do is be a little bit objective to realize this is not exactly fair. Call the man guilty for tax evasion if you want to. Call him guilty for business whatever if you want to. Call him guilty for business fraud. Call him guilty for campaign finance laws. But go call him guilty on those things. Here's the thing. The Federal Election Board already said that they would not bring charges against him because they did not feel like there was a case. Think about that. And then this Alvin Bragg guy comes forward with a little bit of a legal jujitsu, if you will. It's kind of crazy. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments.